Of writers covering progressive issues. Kate Shepard is a reporter for Mother Jones. Taegan Goddard is editor of Political Wire, and Judd Legum is editor-in-chief of Think Progress. Gang, it is great to have you all here, and I want to start out with what's going on with Chris Christie, because we just got the tweet from his official handle saying that he will be holding a press conference coming up at 1:30 p.m. in Trenton today. Taegan, obviously this is a big moment for the governor, because not only is he thinking about what's going to happen in the state of New Jersey and how to repair and appoint someone in the late Frank Lautenberg seat, but also about his political future. Our first read points out that Republicans close to this process assume that no matter how Christie interprets the law regarding the special election, someone will sue and get courts to clarify, and that's why Christie wants to set things in motion. As we talk about that, Taegan, again, 1:30 today, Chris Christie, what do you expect, or what are the scenarios we can expect?
Right. I've been told, actually, that Christie yesterday had already set his sights on former Governor Tom Keene Sr. That's his ideal pick. That's the moderate governor of New Jersey. That's the person that he thinks would be best able to serve in this interim appointment. The question, though, remains whether Keene wants to do it. And he's not to be confused with Tom Keene Jr., who lost his Senate race a few years ago to Senator Robert Menendez by about 8 or 9 points. But Keene would be a strong pick. The reason he wants to get this thing kicked off early, as you say, though, is that there will be court challenges. Democrats and Republicans don't see eye to eye on the strategy behind this. Republicans would like an interim senator to serve through November 2014 so that they could have an at least assured Republican vote through that period. Democrats want a special election as early as possible. The calculation that Christie has to go on, does he want a special election on November 2013 this year when he's also on the ballot? That's something that could actually help drive Democrats to the polls and possibly jeopardize his re-election bid.
Meanwhile, there are a lot of calculations that go into this, and, you know, reading that the New Jersey Star-Ledger reporting that Christie's been cashing some checks from Democratic supporters like George Soros. Judd, what calculations go into Christie thinking about not just the best person that suits the appointment, but what's good for his brand nationally?
Yeah, exactly, Thomas. And this is a really fraught process. I mean, if you remember, this is exactly what landed Rod Blagojevich in jail, trying to figure out who he's going to appoint to be a senator. So I think with Christie, he's really stuck because he can appoint somebody like Tom Keene Sr., not cause any waves, probably the best choice if he's really looking towards his election in 2014. But how is that going to go over with the national Republicans who probably want to see Christie demonstrate his true conservative values and beliefs, right, and put out someone who's a lot more ideological and who's going to partner with the people who they admire in the United States Senate, probably in the more in the realm of a Rand Paul or a Ted Cruz, and that's probably the kind of person they'd like to see. So he's going to disappoint one group or another, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes.
So, Kate, one thing that the governor's been clear about that he and Lautenberg didn't always see eye to eye, but obviously the governor seems to be considering the legacy, what Lautenberg leaves behind. But what is the legacy of Senator Lautenberg?
Well, Lautenberg was clearly he was a progressive. He was really strong on a number of issues, especially public health. He was, he fought against tobacco and setting stronger laws on alcohol. One of the biggest issues that I've been following was his efforts to reform chemical policy here in the U.S. He was the leader on fighting to change the Toxic Substances Control Act, which is a 37-year-old law governing our chemicals that's really just outdated. And even up until last week, he was out there working on legislation. He introduced a bipartisan bill with David Vitter from Louisiana. And it's just something that was a really key issue to him. And despite being really progressive, he was someone who did try to create partnerships to pass legislation and to see real change. And I think that's something that he will leave behind. And I think that's something that Christie's probably trying to keep in mind as he seeks to fill his seat, fighting somebody who can really represent New Jersey and represent, I think, the policies that people there are looking for in a leader.
Again, we might have forward motion on this again because the governor tweeting out that he's going to have a press conference today at 1:30. We're going to have that live here on MSNBC. But I want to move on to what we've been reading about the House factions and how that's been kind of crystallized recently. The latest article within the Washington Post, and Taegan, it says in reference to the fiscal cliff, that vote to avert the fiscal cliff marked a breaking point for House Republicans who had disintegrated into squabbling factions, no longer able to agree on, much less execute, some of the most basic government functions. And it points a big finger to John Boehner. Right now, the fact that there really is nothing for the party to coalesce behind other than scandal in D.C., and scandal's not an agenda.
No. That's exactly right, Thomas. I mean, when you look at what's happened to the Republicans since that vote on New Year's Day this year, they haven't been unified on anything. There is no unifying governing philosophy right now. The most striking anecdote in that Washington Post story, I think, was soon after that vote, a cabal of, it was described as a cabal of conservative Republicans gathered together trying to figure out whether they were going to oust Speaker Boehner in the vote for speakership. And they prayed all night, and then some of them came back and said that God told them to spare Boehner for at least this Congress. And, you know, there was a time when people said that if God told you to do something like that, that, you know, men in white coats would take you away. But this seems to be what governs much of the Republican caucus right now.
Taegan, you're going all College of Cardinals on me with those words, like the cabal of how the Republicans thought about this. But there was, you know, Judd, obviously Eric Cantor, he's waiting in the wings for something like that to happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's important to sort of take a step back and talk about how we got here. And really, this is the product of a years-long effort to gerrymander the House of Representatives. All the districts that most of these folks come from are so bright red because of the gerrymandering process. And what we've ended up with is a group of folks in the House of Representatives who are really out of step with where the country is, and Boehner understands that. I mean, if you remember, the Democrats won 1 million plus more votes than the Republicans in 2012 in the House races, but yet they still trail by 17 seats. So what Boehner is struggling with is, how do we keep the Republican Party even close to viable and still deal with folks who are responding to districts that are really not representative of the country as a whole.
Meanwhile, the budget fights go on, and Kate, I want to get you on the record with this, because as we've been covering the California wildfires, obviously the destruction in Oklahoma with the tornadoes, where do we stand with FEMA funding?
Well, one issue that I've been looking at is just how we chronically underfund FEMA on the front end. It's been years since we passed the budgets, in a normal fashion. But every year we look at budget proposals where we're just rolling back the funding for FEMA. Last year, the Obama administration's original proposal would have cut it by another $1 billion. And then we see a year like the last year where we just really, have a huge demand for FEMA funding. It's not just these tornadoes, but it's the wildfires. It's still Hurricane Sandy payouts from last year, and we use these budget tricks. So we pretend that you can't, that you have to pay it back from the budget. Sorry. Sorry, you have to pay it out as emergency funding instead of in the budget straight up.
And maybe they could look at the budget of the IRS, take some of their Gilligan's Island money from making little videos, and we could get it out to people that have lost their house. Kate Shepard, Taegan Goddard, Judd Legel, thanks so much.